Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
I'm really pleased to introduce my guest today, Sarah Downie. Sarah is an accomplished executive and strategist with a particular talent for transforming, leading, and activating purpose-led organisations. As CEO for the Shared Value Project Australia and New Zealand, she builds on 20 years' experience in the for-profit and not-for-profit sectors to champion a better future for business and society collectively through shared value. Driven by the belief that corporate assets, resources, and innovation can unlock unrivaled social progress whilst increasing business prosperity and sustainability, Sarah's committed to advancing a new kind of capitalism fit for the times. A member of the Shared Value Global Steering Committee, she directs the SVP team to deliver the evidence, tools, education, and inspiration required to make this urgent shift. Established in 2014, Shared Value Project has grown into a thriving and influential network of members including AIA Australia, IAG, NAB, PwC Australia, Nestlé Oceania and Optus. Sarah, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Me too. We've been sort of in each other's networks for a number of years now, and the conversations we've been having are so aligned that I'm really keen for you to share some of your thinking and what's happening with shared value on the show. Now, before we get into it, I'd like to ask you a general question that I'm asking all of my guests. What does purpose mean to you, and what is your perspective on this idea of love in business?
I think that's a fantastic question. When you sort of told me about For Love or Money, it just immediately resonated with me because we're not two different people, are we? We're not one person at work and one person in our home life. You know, we need to love what we do, and we need to connect what we do at work to the things that we're passionate about outside of work, whether that's family, our connection to planet, our community. So the idea that we should talk about what we love and how we make money just feels like exactly the right conversation to have.
Yeah, brilliant. I knew we had a meeting of minds that first time, and the language I guess we share shows that. So can you tell us a bit about your personal background, where you came from, what you were doing before, and what led you to Shared Value today?
Well, it's a bit of a windy road, I think, like many people who end up in this sort of purpose space. I started my career actually in advertising, in brand, and I think we share sort of some love of brand from that time as well. But in that sort of time of my life, I was working with very big brands, with Nike, Telstra, Australia Post, Qantas, and really sort of looking to understand their brand purpose was. And back then, that didn't really include a social purpose, to be honest. It was a brand purpose. It was definitely a delivery back to customer. But this idea of having a role that was bigger than that just wasn't really part of the conversation. And for me personally, I think I just really felt like I was lacking purpose, and I went to find it. Is the sort of honest, somewhat naive, and feels a bit dorky truth to the matter. Is I didn't feel that I was getting a whole lot of personal purpose. So I thought the answer to that was to delve into the not-for-profit sector. I thought that's where I'll find purpose, organizations that are for purpose, really working and dealing with some of our more vulnerable, and that's where I would find it. And look, I certainly did. I certainly found a great deal of inspiration from working with the likes of Make-A-Wish and Big Brothers Big Sisters, and then more recently at One Girl. But I also discovered in that journey that there was a real role for business that was missing, and that despite the passion and talents of the sector, they just really struggled to find the investment to unlock solutions that could be done at scale. So I went searching, I guess, for how business could have a role and what role should business have. And that led me to shared value.
And that, yeah, that sort of revelation to you that business had a role to play in this, and that it could bring something that the non-profit sector couldn't bring. I'm interested in exploring that a little bit, because I think so many people, I hear so many stories of people, particularly in the corporate world, who have become disillusioned and they want to go work for a non-profit. And yet what you're saying is, yes, you know, you got a lot out of it, but there was something missing there that you thought business could bring to the table. What was that, do you think?
I had a penny drop moment actually, and I went to and one of the authors of Good is the New Cool, Afdal, was doing a good dinner in Melbourne, and to a big group of people, he said, "Whatever you do, don't leave your job if you want to find purpose. Use your job to create purpose." And I thought, "Oh, I've made too late. I've already done it. I'd already jumped into the not-for-profit sector." But it got me thinking that how do we go from within the system and use the tools of business to create change? What if we could take all of the assets and resources and IP and innovation of the private sector and actually use what it has, its strengths, its investment, frankly, and its scale? How do we use that to actually solve societal issues? Because at the end of the day, the not-for-profit sectors, they're the ones close to the issues. They understand the issues better than anyone, but they are so hamstrung by the old age investment vehicles that they're not truly able to really achieve the level of impact. And so something kind of needed to change. And so having seen it from both sides of the fence, I thought the not-for-profit sector needs different kinds of investment, and the private sector needs to not redistribute their income in the form of, frankly, grants or short-lived projects. You know, it actually needs to use the weight of business to create change. And luckily for me, the idea had already been created, and it had a name and a framework, an existing group of companies that were already on the journey. And so I realised that I could bring the two worlds together at shared value.
Brilliant, which brings us to shared value, and that's a great lead into it. So can you tell us, you know, who are shared value? How did they start? And, you know, what does it offer members today?
Well, shared value really started actually 10 years ago this year. So we are celebrating 10 years of this, shared
Happy
value movement.
anniversary.
So that's quite an exciting time. It's a good reflection time always when you come across a milestone like that. But just going back 10 years ago, I mean, the world was obviously quite different then. And it started by Mark Kramer and Michael Porter, who are both Harvard professors, very accomplished in their own rights. Michael Porter, anyone who's done an economics degree will know him from his 5 forces of competitive strategy. And Mark Kramer really coined collective impact. He's a lot of work in strategic philanthropy. And so they really came together, as I said, 10 years ago, with this idea that rather than businesses carving out 1%, if they're lucky, to a philanthropic foundation, that they could do a lot more good by actually thinking about their business models. And more than just do good, they could actually create growth and innovation by helping to think about the intersection of societal issues with their business. And so the idea and the reason why we call it shared value is that we're looking to create both value for society and value back to the business. And if we can do that, then we can actually create an investment vehicle that is scalable and actually create some big impact. That's the idea anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. And it goes to a question that I've been putting out a lot recently when I'm speaking or just talking to people or in social media. And it's a question that seems to resonate with a lot of people, and it goes right to the heart of what shared value is about, I think. And the question is, what if business hasn't yet realized its true potential? You know, we've been traveling along this route for what, 40, 50 years, where the purpose of business is to make a profit and deliver a shareholder return. And it's ingrained in how we think, in how everybody thinks. But what if it always had potential to be so much more? What if, before Milton Friedman came along with his idea of shareholder capitalism, what if the route we were on there was in fact the right one and we took a wrong turn?
Well, I think in essence, that's exactly what we believe with shared value. I think that the idea of capitalism itself is not necessarily broken. It's just the ingredients that we put into how the model itself works. So, in some ways, we talk about shared value as actually being the most ancient of concepts. That if you go back before Milton, you go back right to the beginning, business was created to serve society. It was created to fulfill an important community need. It's just somewhere along the lines, we just got so distracted by making money. We got disconnected from the communities in which we operate, or because our supply chains became far away, we became global organizations that weren't sort of rooted in any one place. We were sort of divorced from the impacts, the negative impacts that were created. So somewhere along the lines, we did just get a little distracted, and money has a tendency to do that. And when Michael Porter and Mark Kramer kind of came to this idea of shared value, what they were hoping, to your point, was to incentivize and inspire business to get back to that kind of ancient idea by saying you're missing the opportunity of business. You're actually missing unlocking a whole lot of growth by not thinking about your broader set of stakeholders. So let's not do this just because it's a good thing to do, the right thing to do. Let's actually think about what it might mean if you actually take this societal lens to the work that you do. And there's some really fascinating examples, I think, coming out.
Absolutely. And even their original HBR article, um, was it 2011 that it was
Yeah,
published, or something
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
I mean, it just, when I read it, it just it just opened up my perspective on the potential. And I think, that article is just as relevant today as it was back then. And I'd love to include it actually in the show notes so people can have a read of
Yeah,
where it all
absolutely.
started.
And it is relevant. It absolutely is relevant. You can absolutely read it today and still feel like it's as fresh as it was 10 years ago. I'm not sure entirely what that says about how far we've come. But I think the difference is, and it's an important difference, is that I think the expectations now are different. So back then, 10 years ago, business was really facing huge trust issues. And the expectation that business would have a role in society, that was a sort of a pretty extreme view that business should be taking a lead in helping to solve societal issues. That was government's role, or the role of the NGO sector. Whereas today, 10 years on, that is definitely changing. The environment for shared value is definitely changing. I think there is much broader expectation that business should play a role, that it should step in when government doesn't fix things or even take the lead. And I think the pandemic is an interesting example of that, where we've absolutely seen businesses take a lead role. So the environment has changed. The need for it sadly hasn't, because we've got a long way to go to actually execute this strategy. But certainly the expectations and the momentum behind it, I feel, has changed.
Absolutely. Expectations of employees, of consumers, customers, and even investors. But you mentioned the pandemic, and I thought, when the pandemic first happened, and we saw the response of business to it, I thought that showed something really interesting. I thought it showed that the natural inclination of business is to create, help when things are when the proverbial hits the wall, that
Mm-hmm.
that's how business responds. When things go bad, that's how they respond, which really goes back to that, have we missed that opportunity of what business could have been about all the time, because we were misdirected in terms of what it should be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the pandemic has shown us something. Absolutely. It's shown us that we have more agency than perhaps we thought. It's shown us that we can move quicker than we ever thought that we could move. We're actually capable of great things. The challenge, I think, with some of the other big societal issues, those ones that have been around for a long time, the inequities, the climate risk, the problem with those is, we sometimes refer to them as the slow crises, is that they don't move as fast as something like a pandemic, and therefore we don't respond in the same way. And it's clear that when we have something that happens like a big pandemic that really shows us that the crisis is on our doorstep, that we can change. The problem is, how do we get that same sense of urgency for these other slow crises that are there, that are just as big and just as damaging? And that's really where the opportunity for shared value can be created, because the biggest, I guess, opportunity for innovation is when you get ahead of the crisis, when you actually get in and design solutions in a preventative way. That's where the biggest opportunity always is. If you're dealing with it at crisis point, you're probably dealing with it as a cost. And that's what we want to avoid as much as possible.
Brilliant. Are you able to give us an example of an organisation who has actually adopted shared value to tackle some of those societal problems?
There's many examples, and they're wide ranging, because when we talk about shared value, what we talk about is for any company, we ask them to have a think about the issues that are most material to their business. And then we ask them to think about how, if they addressed that issue, could they actually create opportunity. So one example, and you mentioned AIA Australia in your introduction, which is one of our founding members. And it's a really easy example. So I'll start there. AIA, the health insurer and life insurer. So it makes sense, pretty clear sense, that if they can help keep their customers as healthy as possible, both mentally and physically, that is going to be good for their business. That is the issue that is most material to their business. And so if they can help keep their members and their customers healthy, then that will obviously lower their claims. And so they do a whole lot of work, both in terms of their Vitality product, which is all about rewarding physical and mental health. And they also work with NGOs to really develop cancer support programs, all designed to obviously support their customers. It's a great thing to do. It's a good thing to do. It's business at its best, but it also is a very profitable thing for them to do. And that's a conversation that I think we need to be more comfortable in talking about, that you can do these things and make money, which I think I've just brought your beloved money, headline back in. But that is what shared value is about. It absolutely is something that AIA is passionate about. They love what they do, but yes, it is absolutely something that returns for them. So that's probably a simple example for your listeners to wrap their head around.
Yeah, and obviously the closer it is to their core business, the more impact they can have in that area, because they can bring all parts of the business to bear on that area of impact, can't they?
Absolutely. And the examples are wide ranging. So if you take an organization like Nestlé, for example, very different from a health insurer.
Yeah.
A lot of the work that is most material and the societal issues that most impact their business are to do with their supply chain, and agriculture, effectively their food supply. So by working with farmers and helping them with their sustainable practices, then they're actually not only obviously working towards big societal issue in terms of climate change, but they're also vastly improving their own food security and shoring up those supply chains in terms of the quality of produce. So there's very clear answers when you can find the issues that are material to the business, and that's really the first place that we look to create. And then it's really innovative ideas. So there's an example we talked at our showcase that we had at our summit just a couple of weeks ago, which is from HSBC in Hong Kong. And they created a specific product which was called No Fixed Address. So they found that they had a really significant number of people in Hong Kong that didn't have a fixed address, that weren't necessarily homeless, but were couch surfing or in insecure housing conditions. And if you don't have a fixed address for more than a couple of years, then you can't get any kind of bank account, let alone a loan, but you can't even get a bank account or a transaction account. So they worked with all the major NGOs in Hong Kong and actually used the address of the NGOs and the relationships that they had with these individuals to create an address and then create a whole product designed for a cohort that had never had access to financial services before. So that's a completely different example, but one that now you can see has a really strong return, both financially for the bank, but a really big societal issue that they're helping.
I love that example, and I'm curious to know, was it just something, an insight that they uncovered about their customers or people who couldn't become customers because of this issue, or was it aligned to HSBC's purpose? Do you know what their purpose was?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really great question, because shared value can come from either side. I think there are definitely examples where it's come from a pain point of the business, where the business needs to solve a particular issue, and in doing so they can create value both back to society and for their business. And then there are absolutely what I call issue first shared value examples, where the issue becomes very apparent to the organization, and the employees get very passionate behind that issue and look to create a solution that is actually going to be profitable to their company, so it's at no risk of ever being de-invested. And so I think that example with HSBC, I'm not entirely sure what led it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was led in that example from a passion and a relationship that they had with NGOs. And I would fully encourage that if that's the case. There's, again, sort of putting my previous kind of NGO hats on. I know that the biggest risk that we have to programming is that the investment will suddenly go. And if you're relying on grants, then the risk is that at some point that will just get cut off. So if companies can find profitable models to support those needs, then all of a sudden they become far more stable and secure.
And also using their expertise and their ability to innovate, to actually seek solutions that might not already exist. So it's not always just about raising funds, to donate to a non-profit. It's about solutions, isn't it, that create impact?
Absolutely. And I think, another example of that by one of our members, Optus, they have a Donate Your Data program, which, you could say, that sounds like a CSR program where they donate, whereas customers can donate their excess data to vulnerable cohorts. But if you think about that with a shared value lens, what they're actually doing is they're finding a way to service a big cohort that might otherwise be unprofitable for them, at least on the outset. And they're making sure that really vulnerable cohorts actually have have communication, and have a device and means, and a stable account that won't get cut off because they can't 1 month before their bill. And they're providing that security, in a way that has never been received before. And they're treating that cohort as just as regular customers as they would anyone else. So you can actually build that respect and that relationship, and then work with those groups to a point, where they can come on board as Optus customers. And I think that's a really fantastic blended approach from what was probably a CSR initiated to something that actually sees this as a business opportunity down the track, and a really important one at that.
Yeah, I've been using a term that I discovered through a company who are in negotiation, trusted negotiator, and they use the term win with. I think in their industry they've actually trademarked it. And what I loved about it was, it goes from this idea of win-lose. There's got to be a winner and a loser. And, if I'm just going for as much profit as I can, then someone's going to lose from that. It moves from win-lose. It goes beyond win-win, where you try to seek mutually beneficial outcomes, to a win-with, which, is about making the pie bigger. So win-lose and win-win still talks about a limited pie that everyone has access to. Win-with is about creating solutions that make benefits greater for everybody. And I think that's the kind of society we need to move towards, with more people thinking about win-with. And businesses, they have the means to think like that and think innovatively to create those kind of solutions.
I love that. I've never heard of win with before, but I'm going to steal that. I
Steal
think that's
away, I already
exactly.
did.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, when we everyone's talking about, we don't want to build back the way it was. We want to build back different. And so I do think that this is it's a really important time, for all of us really in society, to think about the kind of society that we want to live in. And it's not the way it was. I mean, the pandemic and climate change has changed us. 2020 has changed us forever. We're not going to go backwards. We don't want to go backwards. So it does create an opportunity to decide what the future does look like. And it is an exciting time, I think, for business. And what's been really encouraging, I guess, from the Shared Value Project, and particularly our members and the enthusiasm from new members coming on board, is that they're using this momentum. They're actually using everything that's happened to create something new and something better. And, the fear was that it might have gone the other direction. People might have gone much more into protective mode. And it doesn't feel like they have, or certainly not the organizations that are talking to us. They're really re-engaged with their people in a way that they've never been before. And I think that's helping to get reconnected with the issues that are important to people. So I don't know, I feel really optimistic, actually.
So do I. And look, I am a huge optimist, but it's changed. I've been banging this drum, as you know, for quite a few years now, and something has definitely changed, and it's accelerated. And yeah, I think the genie is out of the bottle, and people are seeing, that change is possible. Even going from, office working to remote working is something that would have taken a decade for us to get to the level we're at now. And yet it happened instantaneously, and, it worked. It can work. There are issues, but it can work. So it begs the question, what else can we change? What can we change? What can we change gradually, but what can we also change radically? Because some things need radical change. We need to shift quickly.
Yeah, and I think, so 10 years on from Shared Value, we heard from our co-founder at our summit a couple of weeks ago. And he did give us a bit of tough love, in his talk, to the summit audience. And he really did fire, I think, put a bit of a fire in all of us to say, we actually need to do better. We actually need to do more, and we need to do it more quickly. This is not a radical idea that business needs to have a role. Business does need to have a role. It has probably one of the biggest opportunities, really, if we think about the size of the private sector, to actually shift the needle. We have enormous societal issues that need solving. So it's great that there's momentum, but we just need to get there faster. And I think I'm absolutely optimistic. I'm feeling good. But he did give me a little bit of a wake-up call as well to say, we can't just play around the edges here. We actually really need to get in and make some change, because unfortunately, these societal issues, and pandemics is just one, are getting bigger and more fierce. And, really it is time for this change.
And that's where collaboration comes in, doesn't it? Organizations, people, companies who wouldn't normally collaborate, who might think of each other as competitors, there is a need and an opportunity for collaboration across a whole range of sectors and companies, to address the urgent needs we've got to address. So with that in mind, can you tell us about your new initiative, the Purpose Playbook? Because I think that could be a game changer here in Australia, and obviously it's also happening globally. So yeah, could you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I guess we developed the Purpose Playbook to respond to the fact that we thought, look, business wants to do this. Business wants to find its purpose. It wants to have a purpose that is bigger than itself, and connect it back to society. Increasingly, the desire is there, the intent is there, but what we hear is that businesses struggle with how to actually do that. And so we developed the Purpose Playbook as a playbook, and as a learning cohort that we run, that is really helping to start at purpose, which I know you will love, and work from purpose using shared value as the how. So if purpose is your why, think about shared value as your how. So just giving you that framework to say, if this is your purpose, let's actually look at the issues that are most material to how you're going to deliver on that purpose. Let's use innovation, let's use partnerships, because that's a really big one. Let's understand what we're trying to measure. And it works in a peer group, through a number of workshops that hope and help to land the concepts of shared value in a really practical way, because that's the missing link, I think, now, is just helping people to do it, get on with it.
And I think that's so exciting, because I feel I know there are so many businesses in corporate Australia, particularly, who have a purpose statement and they think their job's done. They've got a purpose statement, it gives context to their current products and services. Maybe it gives them a little bit of room to move with that, but it's not changing the way they think. They are still thinking about, how do we deliver maximum profit? And yeah, there's our purpose statement on the wall, on our website, wherever it may be, and that's it. It's passive. It's not creating any action. And what you're doing with the Purpose Playbook, what shared value does, beyond that, is embed it into the organisation, get the organisation thinking differently. And it's when they start doing that I think the light bulbs start going off, because there's so much value to be gained, and yeah, it's bringing that value to life. So can you? I know it's difficult to do it on a podcast without the visuals, but can you give us the sort of basic premise of leading with purpose and the Purpose Playbook?
Yeah, so I think probably the best way to describe it is, if we start with a purpose of an organization, and at the Shared Value Project, we don't tell you how what your purpose should be, but we certainly challenge organisations on whether they have a purpose worth having. So it needs to be a purpose that is relevant, and that might sound obvious, but you'd be surprised. So not looking for fluffy statements, but looking for what is the role of your business for your community. What do you deliver? What do you serve? And what role are you hoping to play? Because there's no point existing unless you actually serve a purpose. And increasingly, we know that is the expectation of employees, and as you suggested, as customers and even investors are looking for that higher order purpose. But then let's break that down and let's actually understand how that contributes to your strategy. So the first thing we do in the purpose playbook is we then talk about how that purpose relates to the strategy of the organization. So when we're talking about shared value, we're not talking about a siloed department off to the side. We're talking about how the whole organization really brings that purpose to life. And that has to be done, the whole way through the organization. So we delve into strategy, and we also delve into culture, because strategy and culture are completely intertwined. Even an argument about what leads what, whether culture leads strategy or strategy leads culture, is a conversation probably for a whole nother podcast and a whole nother day, but a fascinating one. So we delve into the role of culture deeply as well. And then we move through kind of, I guess, the pillars of shared value. And as I suggested, one is about looking at those issues that are material. It's about looking at your innovation process, because in a lot of ways, shared value is really just an innovation strategy that says that you can find new opportunities, whether it's products or services, or new opportunities within your value chain to create value for your organization, whilst also solving society's issues at the same time. And then it works through operations, so how you actually operationalize shared value, which is, again, not a small component, but when you're trying to retool an entire organization, there's specific operational structures that help to get it moving across an organization. And then we talk about things like HR, communication, what kinds of people you need. And that's not about specialists in shared value. That's about, again, kinds of people throughout your organization that you need in order to embrace becoming a shared value organization. Now, obviously, the way I've talked about it suggests that the entire organization is going to be retooled from day one. And in most cases, that is not the case. In most cases, it starts with a pilot idea, testing the waters, proving it, measuring it, refining it, and then taking back and scaling that idea. But if people can walk away from doing something like the Purpose Playbook with a tangible idea of how shared value works in their organization, they're much more likely to take that inspiration and actually do something with it. So that's what we're trying to do.
And do you, how deeply do you involve different areas of the business within this? Like, do you tend to work with a leadership team? Do you work with different department heads? How does it normally work?
So typically the way it works is often we have someone from the sustainability or social impact or that whatever that team is called within an organization. They're often the ones that are sort of championing shared value. They're the ones that kind of see it as the real unlocker within their organization. They're often the ones, kind of waving the flag for us. But then they recognize that in order to really create shared value, they need the business itself to be on board. So what we task them to do is to bring someone from the business. So from strategy or from operations, from product development, different organizations will have different people. But they come together and they work in pairs. So that they can bring something specific from the business as well as that kind of social sustainability lens to the conversation. And that's when we're running it as a peer group. We also run it as a dedicated organisational purpose playbook cohort as well. And that would include people from across the organisation. So think your heads of and leads of people and culture, your brand and marketing leads, your sustainability leads, a strategy lead. And again, that's a different way of running the cohort, but that's a really interesting way to do it when an organisation wants to embed it across the entire organisation. So we run it in those two ways.
Yeah, brilliant. And so you're going to have peer groups, through the year? Are you going to do a few groups across the year?
Yeah, that's right. So we really just take expressions of interest, which we take on our website. And then depending on the nature of what that organisation needs, we then decide whether we think a peer group is the best way for them to start, or a sort of a dedicated organisational focus. And we'll be running those a couple of times a year.
Brilliant. So if somebody is listening to this and they're interested and wanting to know more, where should they go? Do they go to their website? Do they contact you? Do they contact somebody else?
So they go to our website, just sharedvalue.org.au. There's a purpose playbook tab, and in there's an expression of interest form. And of course, they can always just contact me directly as well. Brilliant.
And when are you kicking off?
So at this stage, we're looking at a September cohort start. So we're just, again, we're trying to be very careful about the design, about the group that comes together, to make sure that it's a really good peer learning. So yeah, at the moment, we're just designing a September one, but we'll also have one starting in the new year as well.
Okay,
I can't believe we're talking about the new year already, but anyway.
I know, it's crazy. And you talked about culture and strategy being a whole new discussion, and the purpose playbook. So maybe what we do is we get you back on the show, either towards the end of the year or early in the new year, and pick up this conversation and see how the first peer group cohort has gone. And yeah, dive a little bit deeper into the people and culture section.
I'd love to, of course, anytime. Have me back.
I will, count on it. So look, thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit about shared value. I know there's so much more about it, but I'm hoping it whets the appetite of people. I know I talk about shared value quite a bit. Some people have heard about it and don't know, don't really know what it's about. Others know it straight away. Others haven't heard of it, and then you mention Michael Porter and Mark Kramer, and they go, "Oh yes, that article." But I think what you're doing is it's so vital, and embedding purpose into organisations in meaningful ways, getting them to think about their value chain, their operations, their strategy, how they can deliver real value that is needed. It couldn't have come at a more appropriate time, and I hope this episode, this interview, gets people wanting to know more, and going to your website and learning about the purpose playbook as well. So to finish, I just want to ask you a final question. Again, it's something I'm asking everybody, and that is, right now, today, it's 2021, right? We have 9 years until 2030, which is the target date for the Sustainable Development Goals. We are the generation that actually have the ability to do something about our future. We get that choice. How we choose determines whether future generations will have that choice. And if we don't do anything, then obviously younger generations, they're simply not going to have that same choice that we have. So with that in mind, and I know that sounds doom and gloom, but it also has opportunity baked into it. What is your message to your fellow leaders in business?
That's a big question. And I feel divided, to be honest. I feel divided on my level of how optimistic I am and then how worried I am. And I know those two things are not meant to live together, but they kind of do. And maybe that's a good thing. So I think, my message is that we do have more agency than ever before. We've proven we are capable of big change and we can do it quickly. 2020 has taught us that. We don't want to go backwards. We shouldn't go backwards. And so now we have this great moment in time where we can decide to do things differently, but we do have to make that choice and we can't talk about it. We just have to get on with it. So I encourage your listeners to join the community, which I know you're a part of, and we're a part of with the Shared Value Project, and all of those organisations, whether they are government, not-for-profit, or private sector companies, who actually decide we want to create a different future, and have a go, because I don't think that there's not something we don't know yet. Like, we know what we need to do. We're not waiting, or at least we shouldn't be waiting for another piece of information to come. We have the ingredients that we have, and now we actually just need to create. And I think that's exciting. And I want to be optimistic and maybe use the worry and the fear just to create that sense of urgency that we need.
Brilliant. Thank you. And if someone still after that goes, yeah, but it's just too big, it's my voice alone, I'd like to do something, but it's just too big. The people I'd need to convince, it's too hard.
It is big, but the examples, when I think about the examples that have really sparked in shared value, they've always been created by one person and not necessarily anywhere near the CEO. Like, one individual thinking things can and should be done differently. And one of the first case studies that we ever had at NAB was one individual in the customer care department who thought we should not be approaching loans in the way that, in defaulted loans in the way that we have, that we need to wrap our arms around these customers and do things differently. And they completely and utterly changed the nature of the whole way that NAB thinks about people who default on their loans, which was years old case study and came to life in a whole new way through the pandemic as one individual in a call center. So I think we can't let that go. We can't say it's for someone else. It actually has to be for us.
Absolutely. And individuals have to act. And if you join the shared value community, you'll find yourself amongst other like-minded individuals who can share their experiences and insights, and together that collaboration can create change.
Well, it certainly helps to do it as a team. I think anything is easier to do with other people, and that's what we're here for.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. If people want to contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can just come in through our website. Again, we have all our contact details, both email and phone numbers, on our website, which is sharedvalue.org.au.
Brilliant. I will include that in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on the For Love and Money podcast. Really, really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey and telling us about shared value. Thanks, Sarah.
I've loved the chat. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?